Karoline Leavitt's first day as the White House press secretary was filled with anticipation. She had always dreamed of working in politics, and now here she was, standing at the podium of one of the most powerful offices in the country. The press room buzzed with energy, journalists preparing their questions, cameras clicking, and the tension rising as Leavitt took her place. She knew the weight of the job on her shoulders. Press secretaries were the bridge between the administration and the public, the spokesperson who had to carefully choose their words and navigate tough questions. Karoline was ready. She had prepared herself for this moment her entire career, moving through the ranks with determination, proving herself time and time again, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen in front of the cameras that day. Psaki, the former White House press secretary, had been a highly respected figure in the political world. Her calm and composed demeanor had earned her admiration from many, even those who didn't always agree with her political stance. But on this day, she wasn't in the White House press room anymore. Psaki had moved on to a different role and was now working as a political analyst for a major news network. She still made her way into public discussions, and that's when the sparks began to fly. Psaki was known for her quick wit and sharp tongue, often using her platform to criticize political decisions and point out areas of disagreement. On the same day Karoline Leavitt was taking her turn at the podium, Psaki made an unexpected comment. During a live broadcast, Psaki had been asked about Leavitt's appointment as the new press secretary. The question was casual at first, something about the changes in leadership, but Psaki's response wasn't as friendly. Psaki, with a smirk on her face, stated, "Well, Karoline is new, and it's clear she doesn't have the experience to handle this position. You know, she's not quite qualified for this job just yet." The comment was made lightly but was laced with a pointed tone. It was clear that Psaki, someone who had held the same role, was implying that Leavitt didn't measure up. It wasn't the harshest insult, but it carried weight, especially coming from someone so established in the same field. The comment hit the press room like a shockwave. Reporters who had been watching Psaki's live interview quickly took notice. They didn't miss a beat, and soon enough headlines were spreading everywhere. Psaki calls Karoline Leavitt unqualified for press secretary role. The media world thrives on drama, and this moment was an opportunity to create a narrative. People began to debate the truth of Psaki's statement. Was Karoline Leavitt truly unqualified? Was it fair for Psaki, a former press secretary, to throw such criticism her way? Karoline Leavitt, who had been watching the broadcast in the White House, couldn't help but feel the weight of Psaki's words. The pressure was building, and she could sense the challenge ahead. But Karoline was no stranger to adversity. She had worked hard to get where she was, climbing the political ladder with dedication even when others tried to undermine her. She had a reputation for being tough and never backing down, and she wasn't about to let this comment derail her. In the moments that followed, the buzz around the press room intensified. Leavitt's first official press briefing was just around the corner, and all eyes were now on her. The question was no longer just about her ability to communicate. It was about whether she could handle the fire that had been thrown her way. Could she rise to the occasion and prove herself, or would she let Psaki's jab be the thing that defined her early days on the job? As Karoline prepared for her briefing, she took a deep breath and thought about what she wanted to convey. She didn't need to get angry or defensive. She didn't need to start a feud with Psaki or let the comment take away from her mission. What she needed was a response that showed her professionalism, her confidence, and her understanding of the role she was there to play. By the time the briefing began, the press room had quieted, the tension palpable. The reporters were ready with their questions, and Karoline knew that many would ask about the comment made by Psaki. She was prepared for that. She had practiced her responses and was ready to address the situation head-on. With a steady hand, Karoline began speaking. Her voice was calm, measured, and firm. She didn't waste any time dwelling on the insult. Instead, she simply addressed the situation with grace, saying, "I respect Psaki's experience, and I understand that the job I'm stepping into is one that requires hard work and dedication. I may be new to this role, but I am committed to doing it to the best of my ability. I'll work hard every day to ensure that the American people receive clear, honest, and transparent communication." Her words were direct and without hesitation. The room seemed to settle as the journalists absorbed what she had just said. Karoline didn't flinch, didn't try to argue or retaliate. Instead, she showed that she was focused on what mattered most, her duty to the people she served. What followed was a series of questions on various topics, but Karoline's response had already made an impact. The reporters could see that she wasn't easily rattled. Despite the challenge she had faced just moments before, Karoline Leavitt was poised and in control. She wasn't going to let one comment define her or her time in the White House. The exchange quickly made its way across social media. People started to share clips of Karoline's response, praising her for staying calm and composed under pressure. They admired her ability to stay focused on the job despite the distractions. Her reputation began to shift, not because of the insult thrown at her, but because of how she handled it. As the days passed, the media continued to discuss the encounter. Some argued that Psaki's words had been a sign of disrespect, while others said it was just a harmless comment. But for Karoline, it wasn't about the opinions of others. She had already moved past the insult and was focused on proving herself in her new role. This moment, though brief, became a turning point in Karoline Leavitt's career. It showed the world that she was not only qualified for the role she had been given, but also that she had the resilience and strength to handle whatever challenges came her way. Little did anyone know that this moment would set the stage for something much bigger to come, a moment that would change everything for Karoline Leavitt and reshape her future in the political world. The morning after the press briefing, the media world was buzzing. Karoline Leavitt had not only stepped into the role of White House press secretary, but she had also faced her first major test and passed it with flying colors. Jen Psaki's comment had certainly stirred the pot, and it was all anyone could talk about. But Leavitt didn't let the criticism consume her. Instead, she turned her attention back to the task at hand, communicating the administration's messages to the American people. The pressure on her was immense. As the newly appointed press secretary, she had to prove her competence not only to the media, but also to the people she worked alongside in the White House. This wasn't just about handling a few reporters. It was about navigating through a minefield of political expectations, public scrutiny, and constant media coverage. Karoline knew the job required more than just words. It required a steady hand, confidence, and the ability to stay grounded in the face of challenges. The press conference following Psaki's insult was an opportunity for Karoline to show her strength. But as soon as she took her seat behind the podium, she knew there was more work to be done. The cameras were rolling and reporters were already preparing their questions, many of which, she anticipated, would circle back to the comments made by Psaki. When Karoline opened the floor to questions, the first one came as expected. "Ms. Leavitt, how do you respond to Jen Psaki's remark that you aren't qualified for the role of press secretary?" Without missing a beat, Karoline responded calmly, "I believe every new role comes with its own challenges, and my appointment to this position is no different. I respect Jen Psaki's experience and her contributions to the White House, but I am confident in my own abilities to serve the American people. Every day I work hard to fulfill my duties with transparency and honesty." Her answer was clear, professional, and measured. She didn't let the comment derail her focus. Instead, she used it as an opportunity to highlight her own qualifications and dedication to the job. The reporters sat in silence for a moment, processing her words. Some seemed impressed by her ability to handle the situation without sounding defensive, while others looked for cracks in her armor. Karoline knew that her response had to be more than just a one-time answer. She needed to prove herself over time, not just in dealing with criticism, but in how she communicated and handled the daily pressure of the role. The weeks that followed would be crucial in shaping her legacy as press secretary. In the days after the press conference, the media continued to discuss the exchange between Psaki and Leavitt. Some outlets focused on Psaki's sharp comment, questioning whether it was fair for a former press secretary to publicly criticize her successor so harshly. Others were quick to defend Karoline, emphasizing her calm demeanor and strong response. Still, a few detractors couldn't help but bring up her age, her inexperience, and her lack of a long track record in government positions. But Karoline remained unshaken. She refused to let the noise distract her. Every morning she arrived at the White House early, poring over briefings, meeting with colleagues, and preparing for the day ahead. She knew that this job wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up every day, being transparent, and doing her best to inform the public. It wasn't long before her efforts began to pay off. During her next few press briefings, Karoline started to gain more respect from the reporters. She was professional, well-prepared, and articulate. Her responses were thoughtful, and she never seemed flustered, even when faced with tough questions. Reporters began to recognize that she wasn't just the new kid in town. She was someone who took her job seriously and was dedicated to making sure the public was informed. One of the key moments that solidified her place was when a journalist asked her about a highly controversial policy decision. The question was pointed and the tone was challenging. "How do you respond to critics who say this new policy will have a negative impact on American families?" the reporter asked. Karoline paused for a moment, then leaned into the microphone. "I understand the concerns and I appreciate the question," she said. "This policy has been carefully reviewed, and we believe it will benefit families in the long term. We're committed to making sure the American people have access to the resources they need, and will continue to monitor the effects to ensure its success." Her answer was measured, balanced, and transparent. The room quieted as reporters processed what she had said. There was no hesitation in her voice, no sign of uncertainty. She had delivered the message clearly, and the journalists seemed to appreciate the clarity she brought to a difficult topic. Karoline had shown once again that she was capable of handling complex issues with grace. Over the next few weeks, the pressure to prove herself never let up. Karoline had to keep up the pace, managing both the demands of her job and the ongoing scrutiny from the media. But slowly, she began to build her own rhythm. The more she worked, the more confident she became in her ability to manage the press briefings and deal with the daily challenges of the job. Behind the scenes, Karoline continued to meet with her team, reviewing briefings, developing talking points, and preparing for upcoming announcements. She understood that being a successful press secretary wasn't just about handling the press. It was about being a strategic communicator who could anticipate questions, manage the flow of information, and always stay one step ahead. And that's exactly what she was doing. But despite the success she was starting to experience in her role, Karoline couldn't forget the comment from Psaki. It was still fresh in her mind. Every time she stood in front of the podium, she could hear Psaki's words echoing in her head. "You're not qualified." But instead of letting those words hold her back, Karoline used them as fuel. They drove her to work harder, to prove that she was more than capable of handling the job. As she continued to work diligently and gain respect from the media, it became clear that the exchange with Psaki had done something unexpected. It had given Karoline an opportunity to demonstrate her resilience. It wasn't just about answering questions. It was about showing the world that she could take criticism and rise above it. The more time passed, the less the media focused on Psaki's initial insult. Karoline's competence and professionalism began to take center stage. While Psaki's comment had caused a stir in the beginning, it was quickly overshadowed by Karoline's ability to handle the role with skill and confidence. It was clear to everyone watching that she was not just a temporary replacement or a figurehead. She was a force to be reckoned with in her own right. The fallout from Psaki's comment was far from over. Although Karoline Leavitt had responded with grace and confidence, the incident had sparked a heated debate that continued to swirl around her. In the days following the press briefing, social media platforms exploded with opinions about the exchange. Some people were on Karoline's side, applauding her calm and collected response, while others continued to question her qualifications. There were even some political analysts who couldn't help but comment on her age and lack of experience. As a young press secretary in a high-profile role, Karoline had already known she would face challenges, but the media attention around this situation was like nothing she had ever encountered before. Every word she said was scrutinized, every action analyzed. The pressure was mounting, and it became clear that this would not be a passing moment. It was turning into something bigger, something that could define her time in the White House. But Karoline was used to pressure. She had learned early on in her career that in politics the only way forward was to stay focused on the job and to tune out the distractions. One of the hardest things for Karoline to handle was the constant media questioning. The press room felt like a battleground at times, with reporters firing off tough questions that seemed designed to test her, to push her limits. The focus of the media was no longer just on the policies she was tasked with communicating, but on her ability to handle criticism and opposition. People wanted to see if she would crack under pressure. They wanted to know if she would be able to keep her composure, especially in the face of personal attacks. The constant scrutiny felt like a weight on Karoline's shoulders, but she knew that she couldn't afford to let it show. Every time she stepped up to the podium, she had to be at her best, answering questions thoughtfully, maintaining her professionalism, and presenting the administration's message clearly. The White House was a place where no one could afford to make mistakes. Karoline understood this better than anyone, and she was determined to succeed despite the challenges. At first, some of the media coverage seemed focused on the negative side of things. Karoline had her critics, many of whom echoed Psaki's initial comment about her inexperience. They questioned her ability to stand toe-to-toe with veteran politicians, wondering if someone so new to the role could handle the pressures of being the spokesperson for the nation. Some of the public seemed to agree, with some even joking about her youth and lack of long-term experience in the government. These comments stung. It was hard not to take it personally, but Karoline knew she couldn't let these voices shape her identity. Rather than focusing on the negative press, Karoline chose to keep moving forward. She kept her eye on the big picture and reminded herself why she was there: to serve the American people, to communicate with honesty and transparency, and to be a steady voice in a time of political chaos. She couldn't afford to get distracted by the noise. The critics would always be there, but she had a job to do, and that was what mattered most. Karoline's dedication to her role began to show in the days that followed. She wasn't just handling press conferences. She was stepping up in meetings with senior White House staff, offering insights, making suggestions, and working alongside others to help shape key messages. Slowly but surely, the media began to take notice of her efforts. She was no longer just the young press secretary who had been criticized by a former colleague. She was becoming known for her hard work, her clarity, and her ability to navigate tricky situations. But even with her progress, the fallout from the Psaki comment wasn't over. Some of her most vocal critics continued to push back, using the media as a platform to amplify their doubts about her abilities. It was clear that they weren't going to let her live down that initial insult so easily. Karoline knew that no matter how well she performed, there would always be those who questioned her or doubted her qualifications. It was in these moments that Karoline leaned on her colleagues for support. The White House press team had become a strong network for her. They rallied around her, offering advice, sharing their experiences, and reminding her that everyone in politics had faced adversity. They reassured her that the challenges she was facing were not unique. Every public figure had to deal with criticism at some point, but it was how they responded to it that determined their success. The support from her colleagues was invaluable, but Karoline also knew that it would ultimately come down to her. She had to prove day in and day out that she was capable of handling the responsibility of the job. That meant staying focused, staying positive, and continuing to perform at the highest level possible. Over time, Karoline's efforts began to pay off. Slowly but surely, the media started to shift their focus away from her inexperience and towards her ability to handle the press briefings with professionalism. Reporters who had initially doubted her began to praise her for her ability to stay composed, even when faced with tough questions. Her calm, measured responses became a trademark of her press conferences, and the public started to take notice. While the critics were still there, they were becoming fewer and farther between. Karoline had proven herself, not just with words, but with actions. She wasn't just the young press secretary who had been insulted by Psaki. She was now the press secretary who had weathered the storm, demonstrated her ability, and continued to deliver the administration's message with clarity and professionalism. The turning point came when Karoline was asked a particularly challenging question during a live press conference. The issue was a sensitive one, and the reporter's tone was sharp as if trying to catch her off guard. How do you explain the administration's handling of this crisis? There are many people who feel that the White House isn't doing enough. To address the issue, the reporter asked. Karoline took a deep breath before responding. She had faced tough questions before, but this one felt different. The weight of the question seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment Karoline wondered if the pressure would finally get to her. But then she remembered why she was there, to serve the public and represent the administration with transparency and honesty. I understand the concerns and I take them seriously, Karoline said calmly. The administration is committed to addressing the issue and providing the support that is needed. We are working closely with our partners to ensure that the necessary steps are taken. It will take time, but we are focused on delivering solutions. Her response was calm, confident, and clear. It was a reflection of everything she had learned since she first took office. Karoline had faced the storm of criticism, and now she was weathering it with confidence. The reporters in the room seemed to respect her answer, and the tone of the press conference shifted. The focus was no longer on her inexperience or her critics. It was on the job she was doing, and she was doing it well. Karoline's handling of that moment marked a shift in the way the media and the public viewed her. While the initial fallout from Jen Psaki's comment had been a challenge, it had pushed Karoline to become a stronger, more focused leader. By sticking to her values, staying true to her mission, and proving herself time and time again, Karoline had silenced her critics and earned the respect of those around her. She was no longer just the new press secretary. She was a force to be reckoned with in the White House. As time passed, the initial media storm surrounding Karoline Leavitt's role as White House press secretary began to calm down. The harsh criticism she had faced in the beginning slowly started to fade into the background, replaced by a growing respect for her work. People who had once doubted her now saw her as a capable and reliable spokesperson. Her calm demeanor, professionalism, and ability to handle tough questions were starting to become the qualities that defined her time in office. One of the things that helped shift the narrative was Karoline's ability to stay grounded. Despite the early negative press, she never wavered in her commitment to the job. She worked long hours preparing for press briefings, meeting with key staff, and studying the issues she would be asked about. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed by the people around her. The team in the White House press office began to see her as more than just a young woman in a high-profile job. She was someone they could rely on, someone who was always prepared and willing to put in the work. Over time, her professionalism earned her the respect of both her colleagues and the media. While she was still occasionally questioned about her lack of experience, Karoline's ability to communicate effectively and handle high-pressure situations made those concerns seem less important. Reporters who had once been skeptical about her began to acknowledge her skill and composure. She had proven that she could manage the press room with ease, no matter how tough the questions got. Her rise to confidence didn't just happen by chance. Karoline was strategic in the way she approached every aspect of her job. She knew that in order to earn respect, she had to do more than just give good answers. She had to anticipate what the media might ask, stay ahead of any potential issues, and always be transparent with the public. Every day, she honed her skills and became more adept at handling the fast-paced environment of the White House press room. The impact of her hard work started to show. Karoline began to develop a reputation for being a strong, effective communicator. People started to see her as someone who could be trusted to deliver the administration's messages clearly and with authority. Her ability to stay calm under pressure and address difficult issues head-on became a hallmark of her time as press secretary. One of the turning points came during a particularly difficult week for the administration. There was a policy decision that had sparked a significant amount of public backlash. The media was buzzing with criticism, and many reporters were eager to get Karoline's thoughts on the matter. The White House knew that the press briefing would be a test of Karoline's ability to navigate a politically sensitive issue. When the day of the press conference arrived, Karoline was ready. She had spent the morning reviewing all the details of the policy and the concerns that were being raised. As she took her place at the podium, she knew that the questions would be tough, but she also knew that this was her chance to show how far she had come. The first question came quickly. Ms. Leavitt, the public reaction to the new policy has been overwhelmingly negative. How do you justify this decision, especially when so many people are upset? Karoline paused for just a moment, collecting her thoughts. She had anticipated this question, and she had already prepared her response. I understand that the policy has sparked concerns, and we are listening to the American people, she said. The administration's goal is always to ensure that we are acting in the best interest of the country. We are committed to making adjustments as necessary and working closely with all stakeholders to ensure the policy achieves its intended goals. Her response was calm and measured. She acknowledged the concerns without sounding defensive, and she reassured the public that the administration was willing to listen and make changes if necessary. This approach helped to ease some of the tension in the room, and reporters were able to ask their follow-up questions without the usual confrontational tone. The press conference was a success, and the media's focus shifted from criticism to a more balanced discussion of the policy and its potential impact. In the days that followed, Karoline's handling of the press conference was widely praised. The media began to see her not just as a spokesperson for the White House, but as a skilled communicator who was capable of managing difficult situations with poise. She had taken a potentially volatile moment and turned it into an opportunity to demonstrate her leadership. Beyond the press conferences, Karoline also began to have a more significant impact on the overall messaging of the administration. She worked closely with the communications team to craft clear, concise statements on key issues, ensuring that the public received accurate information in a timely manner. Her ability to communicate effectively helped the White House stay on message even when facing unexpected challenges. As her time in the role continued, Karoline began to feel more confident in her ability to handle whatever came her way. The early doubts and criticisms had faded into the background, replaced by a growing sense of respect from both her colleagues and the media. She had shown that she could handle the pressure of the job, and that she was more than capable of stepping into the role of press secretary. But even with all her success, Karoline knew that there was always more work to be done. She couldn't afford to rest on her laurels. The job of press secretary was constantly evolving, and the challenges would never stop coming. There would always be new issues to address, new policies to explain, and new questions to answer. Karoline understood that in order to continue to be successful, she would have to keep growing, learning, and adapting. The experience she had gained in her early days as press secretary had taught her valuable lessons. She had learned the importance of preparation, the power of staying calm under pressure, and the need to be transparent and honest with the public. These were the qualities that had helped her overcome the initial criticisms and had allowed her to thrive in the role. Her ability to take criticism in stride and use it as motivation to work harder had become one of her greatest strengths. She had faced challenges from all sides, media, political opponents, and even former colleagues, but she had never backed down. Instead, she had used each challenge as an opportunity to grow stronger and more capable. Now, as she looked back on the journey that had brought her to this point, Karoline realized just how far she had come. What had started as a difficult and contentious situation had become a defining chapter in her career. She had turned the narrative around, proving that she was not only qualified for the role of press secretary, but that she was capable of thriving in it. She had faced the storm, held her ground, and emerged as a strong leader. Karoline knew that the road ahead would continue to be filled with challenges, but she was no longer the same person who had first stepped into the White House press room. She had earned her place, and she was ready for whatever came next. As time went on, Karoline Leavitt's journey as the White House press secretary continued to evolve. She had faced challenges that could have derailed her career, but instead, each obstacle had only served to make her stronger and more resilient. The media storm that had followed her appointment had long since died down, but the lessons she had learned during those early days stayed with her. These lessons shaped the way she approached her role, her career, and her life moving forward. The public's perception of Karoline had changed dramatically over the months. What had started as skepticism due to her youth and lack of experience was gradually replaced by respect. She had proven herself in the most high-pressure situations, handling tough questions with ease, and ensuring that the administration's messages were communicated clearly and transparently. She wasn't just the new press secretary anymore. She was a trusted figure in the White House, someone who had earned her place at the podium through hard work and dedication. But Karoline didn't just stop there. As her time in the role continued, she began to use her platform to advocate for issues that were important to her and to many Americans. One of her main focuses became ensuring that the voices of young people were heard in the political conversation. Karoline knew that her experience in government was still relatively limited, but she also knew that her unique perspective as a young woman in a position of power could bring valuable insight to the table. Her ability to balance the pressures of her job with her desire to make a difference set her apart from many of her peers. She began to speak more openly about her experiences and how they had shaped her worldview. In her public statements and interviews, Karoline often emphasized the importance of perseverance, integrity, and the belief that anyone, regardless of their age or background, could make a significant impact in politics. She became a role model for many young people who saw her as proof that determination and hard work could lead to success, no matter how daunting the odds might seem. In addition to her advocacy for young people, Karoline began to build strong relationships with her colleagues in the White House. Her leadership skills grew with each passing day, and she became known not just for her communication abilities, but for her collaborative approach. She wasn't just there to speak on behalf of the administration. She was there to work alongside others, listening to their ideas, offering support, and helping to create a unified message. Her willingness to listen and work with others was especially important in a fast-paced environment like the White House where tensions could run high and egos often clashed. Karoline was known for her ability to mediate difficult situations, always focusing on what was best for the team and the administration as a whole. She was able to bridge gaps and bring people together, which earned her the admiration of many in the White House, from senior staff to junior members. Despite her growing success, Karoline remained humble. She knew that she couldn't have reached her current position without the support of her team, the guidance of her mentors, and the opportunities she had been given along the way. She often credited her early experiences in politics for preparing her to handle the pressures of the role, but she also recognized that every day was an opportunity to learn and grow. Karoline's success as press secretary didn't go unnoticed outside of the White House either. Her story became an example of how someone could rise above adversity and prove themselves in a competitive and often unforgiving field. Her rise to prominence was seen as an inspiring tale of perseverance, especially for young women who aspired to work in politics. Many people looked up to her as an example of what was possible if you were willing to put in the work, take risks, and stay focused on your goals. Her public image continued to evolve as well. Once seen as a newcomer with little experience, Karoline was now recognized as a seasoned political figure. She had earned the respect of her colleagues, the media, and the American public. The respect that she had fought so hard to gain had become the foundation for a new chapter in her career. But as Karoline's reputation continued to grow, she also understood that the challenges of being in the spotlight were far from over. Every decision she made, every word she spoke was still under intense scrutiny. The job of press secretary was demanding, and she knew that every briefing, every speech, and every interview had the potential to make headlines, both for the right and the wrong reasons. Nevertheless, Karoline was no longer intimidated by the pressure. She had learned how to handle the intense scrutiny, and more importantly, she had learned how to stay true to herself. She knew that her authenticity was one of the things that had made her successful in the role. She didn't try to be someone she wasn't. Instead, she leaned into her strengths and stayed grounded in her values. For Karoline, success was never about pleasing everyone. It was about staying committed to the work, being honest with the public, and doing her best to make a positive impact. Looking ahead, Karoline knew that her career was far from over. While she had accomplished a great deal in her role as press secretary, She also knew that there were many more challenges and opportunities waiting for her. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to continue pushing herself and striving for excellence, wherever her career might take her. Her time in the White House had already been transformative, and Karoline had no doubt that it would continue to shape her for years to come. She had learned so much about leadership, communication, and perseverance, and these lessons would stay with her throughout her career. She had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger, more confident, and more capable than ever before, as she looked back on the moment when Psaki had insulted her. Karoline realized just how far she had come. The insult had been hurtful at the time, but it had also been the catalyst for her growth. It had challenged her, pushed her to prove herself, and ultimately set her on the path to success. What had seemed like a setback had turned out to be an opportunity in disguise. An opportunity to demonstrate her resilience and rise to the occasion. Now, as a respected and successful figure in the political world, Karoline knew that she had become a symbol of what was possible when you refused to give up on your dreams. Her story was far from over, but it had already become one that inspired countless others to pursue their passions, work hard, and never let obstacles stand in their way. In the years to come, Karoline would continue to break new ground, set new standards, and inspire those who followed in her footsteps. She had proven that with determination, hard work, and a commitment to making a difference, anyone could rise to the top, no matter how tough the journey might seem. And that, perhaps, more than anything, was her greatest accomplishment.